And now let us try to pay attention to the most important aspects of the third lecture. Stylistic classification of the vocabulary. All functional styles can be classified into two large groups, formal and informal. The mode of speech, the choice of formal or informal words, is determined by the social context. The choice of the right word, whether formal or informal, depends on its stylistic characteristics. To be more precise, depends on the functional style it represents. Informal vocabulary is usually employed in one's immediate circle, family, relatives, or friends. One uses informal words when at home and when feeling at home. As for formal style, it is usually restricted to formal situations. Usually formal style embraces words associated with professional communication and so-called learned words. So-called because this term lacks in precision. So we can use out-of-date, scholarly, erudite. Learned words may also be called literary, but they lack precision even more than the term learned. Learned words are merely associated with a printed page, and therefore we may think that they cannot be used in everyday speech. But in fact, this is an erroneous attitude, because any educated person is sure to use many learned words not only in his formal letters, legal documents, or scientific articles and professional communication, for instance during lectures, but also in his everyday speech. Educated people, both in fiction and in real life, use learned words quite naturally. But of course, excessive use of learned words, learned elements, both in prose and in real life, might sound ridiculous. Utterances overloaded with pompous words usually tend to be pretentious, and their users claim that they are far too refined to use neutral vocabulary, but instead of refinement and elegance, they achieve the exact opposite. They look absurd and ridiculous. Though, if we did not know some learned words, it would be impossible to deal with official documents or even read fiction. Moreover, you would not be able to listen to lectures of stylistics which are delivered in English. Though all the learned words should be chosen in moderation. We have already mentioned that the excessive use of learned words may lead to absurdities. We mentioned poetic words, and we said that the words which are usually called literary words are described as refined. And the most interesting subdivision of learned words represented by the words is found in fiction. They usually stand close to the previous group, in other words, learned words, but at the same time, poetic words have their own peculiarities. They are lofty, high-flown, and coloring. Poetic words are mostly archaic words, aiming to produce an elevated effect. Words create mood and context, and for this purpose, old-sounding, old-fashioned, or obsolete words have often been employed. The literary trend of Romanticism and symbolism, for example, was rich in fresh poetic terms. In formal literary stratum of vocabulary, we can single out archaic and obsolete words. We know that words change their meanings and sometimes drop out of the language altogether. New words spring up and replace the old ones. Some words stay in the language a very long time, and while gaining new meanings, they become richer and richer polysemantically. Other words live but a short time and are like bubbles on the surface of water. They disappear, leaving no trace of their existence. This stratum of words stand close to the learned words, particularly to the modes of poetic diction. In spite of the fact that, as a rule, archaisms and learned words belong to the printed page, it is also possible that they both can be used in conversational situations. Archaic words are either partly or fully out of circulation. They can be met in the Bible, prayers, psalms. Also, historical novels often abound with archaisms. The authors of historical novels usually use them to create a particular period atmosphere. And of course, we must not forget poetry, which is replete with archaisms. we must take into account one very important fact. Whatever appears to us as archaism, at a certain period, it was in fact an example of everyday language. We can find numerous archaisms, so for example, in Shakespeare. Archaic words and phrases are very seldom, if ever, found in the style of official documents. Business letters, legal documents, diplomatic documents, etc. Though there are some obsolescent words which may be preserved within the style of official documents. The function of these words is terminological in character. It is also possible that archaic words were used for satirical purposes. It is when the situation in which the archaism is used is not appropriate to the context. And there remains also the problem of differentiating these three terms: archaic, obsolescent, and obsolete. Obsolescent words are called such words which are in the stage of gradually passing out of general use, the beginning of the aging process when the word becomes rarely used. Obsolete words are those that have already gone completely out of use but are still recognized by the English-speaking community. And the third group is called archaic proper. These words are no longer recognizable in modern English. Words that were in use in Old English and which have either dropped out of the language entirely or have changed in their appearance so much that they have become unrecognizable.